Well, WandaVision is over, but the Marvel-starved public need not wait long for more superhero shenanigans. We're already ready to greet our friends Bucky Barnes and Sam Wilson back as Falcon and the Winter Soldier in their very own show, seemingly full of teeth-clenched teamwork and a hearty helping of villain butt-kicking. But what exactly is this show actually gonna be about? So, after the tumultuous Endgame, Steve Rogers ended his tenure as Captain America by managing to go back in time and getting to live the quiet, happy life he deserved with the love of his life, and handing down the title to someone new, his old partner, Sam Wilson. It's a nice ending to a story, to be sure, but as Sam himself says in a trailer, that overgrown frisbee carries a lot of historical baggage. And he seems unsure about taking up the mantle, even as a new government-appointed captain named John Walker, known in the comics as the U.S. Agent, takes the scene. With legacy seeming to be a big theme of the show, what with dealing with the two former sidekicks of a retired hero and all, it could be pretty cool to see the older Steve Rogers return to reassure his old buddy that he is indeed the right man for the job, and perhaps even join in the fight against the U.S. Agent. Who knows, he may even pull a Tony Stark and die in one final act of heroism, showing that he is still the hero we all remember, even after he got his reward. Now, in the films, Steve may have made the choice to specifically appoint Sam as his successor, and sure enough, that has happened in the comics and makes sense for the character as a longtime ally of the Captain. But there was also a time where Bucky was the de facto Captain America, due to Steve Rogers having been presumed dead. And since they seem to not be getting along super well, at least at first according to the trailers, it's not impossible to imagine that there may be some friction regarding which one of them truly deserves to carry on the name of Captain America. After all, both characters have pretty good claims to the title both in and out of universe. Bucky obviously has seniority as the Captain's original sidekick, but Sam Wilson's historical importance in popular culture as one of the earliest high-profile black superheroes is not to be sneezed at either. But who says there has to be only one Captain at a time? Wouldn't it be beautiful to see the two of them lay aside their rivalry in the face of greater adversity, share the title, and prove that Captain America is not simply a man nor a face for the government's lapdogs to wear, but instead a representation of the ideals of unity and justice that Steve always stood for? I, for one, think the old man would approve. One of the major things Iron Man 3 got some flack for back in the day was kind of wasting its villains. Now, with Marvel seeming to try and use their TV shows to give their underutilized characters time to shine, some are theorizing that perhaps these villains, or at least what they left behind, may get their chance in the sun. After all, while Ben Kingsley's Mandarin was a sham and Aldrich Killian died in battle, the latter did create AIM, an organization which in the comics have always tried to get their grubby hands on any and all super science. And how could they resist the chance to snag a batch of some of that new super serum that may play a part in the story? Fans have already theorized that the paragliding soldiers Falcon is seen fighting may be AIM agents anyway, and it doesn't seem completely implausible. So far, we know of two major villains appearing in the show, and one character that may or may not be an antagonist, depending on what exactly his role is in the grand scheme of things. In terms of villains, I am of course talking about the return of Helmut von Zemo, who seeks to eradicate the very concept of superheroes, and the Flag Smasher terrorist group, based on the similarly named character from the comics whose goal is to destroy all national borders. And in the midst of all this, we have John Walker, a man appointed by the government to be the new, better Captain America. But the good Captain has always fought against corrupt government officials in the comics when he felt they betrayed the ideals of the nation, and who's to say that they aren't pulling the strings this time? Last we saw Zemo, he was arrested by the CIA. And it seems unlikely a man with no extraordinary abilities of his own would be able to escape without any help. If the government wants to introduce their own soldier as the superheroic face of America, would it be so hard to imagine them wanting the public to lose their trust in all those loose cannon heroes by letting Zemo spread his message and potentially defeat the two remaining torchbearers, only to then introduce their new and improved captain to the public? And him defeating a group called the Flag Smashers surely would make for some fine PR in the eyes of the nation's more patriotic citizens. Believe it or not, for all his talk about how awful superheroes are, Zemo actually had his own superhero team once. Which was, of course, just a front for a much more sinister scheme. In the comics, during a time when most superheroes were MIA, a team called the Thunderbolts appeared, led by a hero calling himself Citizen V. In truth, Citizen V was Baron Zemo in disguise, and his heroes were all former villains playing a part in order to gain the public's trust. However, over time, they got to like being heroes and opposed Zemo, eventually becoming a true superhero team in their own right. With Zemo's agenda of undermining superheroes, introducing this team could make a certain amount of sense. Not only have several characters associated with Captain America actually been members of this team in the comics, such as villains like Batroc, Ghost, and even Bucky himself, but it was also once led by none other than Hawkeye, who we all know is getting his own show later down the line as well. And it's not a completely unsupported theory either. It's been said that a pink-haired actress has been spotted on the set of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which could very well indicate that at the very least, founding Thunderbolts member Songbird may appear. Just in case you don't think 4 potential different captains in one show is enough, there is actually a 5th captain the show could introduce to make things even more interesting. Namely, Isaiah Bradley. See, in the comics, the ever-war-hungry military weren't content with just one super soldier, and they continued their experiments on African-American soldiers with less than pretty results. Most subjects died horribly, and the whole thing was naturally covered up. The one man that did survive was Isaiah Bradley, who used a stolen Captain America suit and shield to stop the enemy from creating their own super soldiers and became an underground legend in the Marvel Universe. In other words, while Sam is next in line for the Captain America title, Isaiah Bradley was the first Black Captain America, chronologically speaking. With the overall potential for social commentary inherent in the idea of Bucky and Sam competing for the title, introducing a black superhero that American history went out of its way to ignore could definitely add some interesting spices to the broth. Plus, come on, a nearly 100-year-old hulking beast of a super soldier entering the fray would just be plain awesome regardless. This one might be wishful thinking, but there is a whole branch of Marvel Comics that still hasn't been introduced in the MCU despite them reacquiring the rights to the characters. I am, of course, talking about the X-Men. Despite expectations and one case of surprise casting, WandaVision pointedly did not introduce or acknowledge mutants and didn't even bring up Wanda and Pietro's father in the comics, the mutant supervillain Magneto. Now, Falcon and the Winter Soldier may seem like an odd place to introduce mutants, but trailers and early set photos have indicated that the fictional Southeast Asian country of Madripoor may appear. This is important because it is a key X-Men location and is where none other than Wolverine lived for a while. Now, granted, it seems unlikely that the show would introduce Wolverine on top of everything else, and it's probably just a small Easter egg. But that doesn't mean it couldn't leave out a few breadcrumbs that may eventually lead to the introduction of mutants in a later story. There truly is no shortage of ways the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series could potentially go. But regardless of whether it will focus on government-sanctioned terrorism, the importance of legacy, or simply just high-flying, shield-throwing action, our butts are firmly planted in our seats, and we are ready for it.